Yes, we are live.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Preeti. Welcome, everyone. You're seeing us live on a few platforms here. We are here to talk about a new series that we are starting today. It's called 25 Days, 25 Skills Around the Teacher's Training Space. Now, why we here? What are we talking about? As you would have guessed by the name per se, both Preeti and myself, we are very excited to impact the space of teachers training. And we were just having a casual chat on what can we really do. I come with close to 20 years of experience of communications, integrated marketing, positioning, emotional intelligence, and Preeti comes with a super rich experience in parenting, coaching, therapy work, and she's also family therapist, not just from a parenting perspective, but a very wholesome space. And we were speaking about the role of a teacher, how important it is in our early years, in our mid years, and even in the advanced stage when we are choosing a career. And increasingly, how challenging it's becoming to stay relevant throughout, to be emotionally present with the child in his or her journey. And that's where we felt that, it's not just about the subject matter expertise that a teacher or a mentor is really focusing on, but a lot to do with the emotional intelligence and mental well-being of the teacher per se, and so much more. And that's where this thought was born, that we're sitting in 2025, and there is, the skills that we had about two and a half decades ago, are they really relevant, or is there more that we need to top up? And that's how the whole brainstorming happened, and we came to the idea of, okay, cool, we're going to go live 25 days of this month and talk about 25 skills that teachers must imbibe as they go along. And for the starters, today we're going to talk about the hat that a teacher must wear in classroom settings, in one-to-one settings. The three things, the three, it comes from the phase of a friend, philosopher, or a guide. And as I invite Preeti in, I would love for her to talk about her passion on the subject, and then dive directly into the subject of what's the vibe that a teacher must select, or how can they be tuning in and out of that as they speak to a student in different scenarios. So welcome, Preeti. Let us know about your thoughts on the subject, and then let's get straight into the conversation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Garima, for having me here. So, I think to really talk about the depth of why I'm passionate about this particular topic, I think I would have to go a little bit into my own journey of how I came to be in this particular profession, right? So I started off as a mental health, a professional, and pretty much every single time a client would walk in, whatever be their presenting issue, it would go back to a moment of disconnection, or an emotional strife that they would have experienced somewhere in their childhood, usually in the context of a relationship with an adult in their lives, a trusting adult in their lives, right? And that discovery at some point in time is what led me to become a parenting coach. And
Mm,
pretty much every time I would work with parents, many times it would come down to understanding that it's not just about the parent and the child. It's not just focusing about why is the child doing this, how can you fix the behavior of the child, but the context in which the child is growing and absorbing from, which is the family environment. So the child is learning not just from how the parent is treating the child, but also how the parent is treating themselves, how the
mm,
parent is showing up themselves, how the parent is connecting with their partner or with their parents, with their in-laws, with the neighbors, and what kind of a social setting they live in. So pretty much the entire context of that family has a humongous impact on what the child perceives and imbibes. And that
mm,
is where from parenting coach I moved on to work with families. Now in the same context, in 24 hours, children pretty much spend 8 hours. That's more than half of their waking hours in their school,
mm,
right? With their peers, with their teachers, with the with fellow students. So there are so much that is happening in the child's life, and a lot of it comes from the school space.
mm,
And what happens in the school, whether we admit it or not. Yes, there are peers, but the overarching impact comes from educators,
True.
right? So I think the context of a child's experience from school comes from educators, and that sets the tone for how the child perceives themselves in terms of their performance, in terms of their individuality, even because a lot of self-expression is predominant in the school space, whether it is co-curricular activities or social interaction, or how they are seen in the eyes of their authority figure, the teacher, right? In a certain sense, their role models, right?
True.
A teacher is perhaps our children's first role models,
Hmm.
right? At a conscious level. Yes, unconsciously, of course, it's always the parents, but consciously, every child at some point in time wants to, become like, I want to be like
Idealizing.
this teacher, right? वो idealization जो होता है, I think that speaks a lot about the significance of that role. And I think that's why what we're doing here is something that I'm super excited about and passionate about.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think we've spent enough time off camera discussing this theme so much that as you speak, it comes from a very deep place of really wanting to make a difference and an impact, and not just the school environment. As they keep growing up, the fact remains that even at a senior years level, at a college level, when they're choosing a career, so many times, so many successful people, we hear them say that, oh, somebody told me do this, and I went ahead and, chose uh, an entire career, an entire life time is chosen on the back of what somebody who was a teacher figure, a mentor figure had just said. And that's where the energy of this person comes in, which is very, very important, right? If we go back to our childhood or to our early years, all these people who were our mentors, our teachers, some of them were really friendly, some of them were really, the buddy kinds, some of them were
Mhm.
really the ones who would bring in a lot of theory, a lot of wisdom, a lot of rooted knowledge. And last but not least, the ones who were guides, like would hold our hand and help us walk the path with us. And that's, for me, is the definition of a friend, a philosopher, or a guide. And most often than not, the teachers that I would attach a greater degree of emotional safety to or dependence on are the ones who would play these roles in some shape and form at different milestones of my journey. But there is always a predominant style which is always associated with a teacher. As somebody who's worked in this space, who's trained thousands and thousands of teachers and spent so many hours in that space, do you think there is a right degree of friendship or guidance that a teacher can bring in, or how does a teacher decide, you know, where to stop being a teacher and start being a friend, or where to stop being a friend and start being a teacher? Like, this is the new age dilemma, right? Where you've got to be in their industry also, where you've got to be speaking the language also, and but you need to maintain your own space as well. So how is this dynamic changing? And what do you think? Do you think that there is, like, does literature give us any guidance on how does one really position themselves to be the perfect mix, if there is any, in this space?
That's a very tricky question there. So, I don't think there is any fixed formula as such,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, I think before we go into the discussion of the degree in which they create that mix of what role they want to play, it would be a good idea to figure out what does each of this role mean, right? So, a friend, philosopher, and guide. So, I will give my definition, and then we'll hear from Garima as well. So, a friend, as such, we all remember. Uh, Teachers who were like buddies, they would have there would be, at least I remember in my school, there was this particular teacher where children, especially around 7th 8th, would go talk about their boyfriends and girlfriends and issues at home, and they would joke and chill, they would exchange comic books, and it used to be strange for me that why are they giggling so much with the teacher? Right? It just doesn't make sense. But somewhere I know the teacher has developed a certain friendly relationship, and I know quite a few teachers, who've said this openly in some of my training programs, that they prefer to be a friend so that they can establish a personal connect with the students,
Hmm.
right? And they do use that as a platform to jump into other roles, right? So if we spoke about a guide is usually somebody who takes on more like a mentoring sort of a role
Hmm.
to guide students on how they should do what they should do, how to come out of problems, help them think in a certain way. It's a little bit more instructional, but kind of in the context of advice or suggestions, right?
Hmm.
And a philosopher, I think, somewhere talks a lot about life challenges and what you will turn out to be in life, and
Yeah.
bringing in values and principles, and you know they kind of go more into guru mode, so to say. Is that making sense? Right. So I think these are the different roles that I have seen teachers play, and often they do jump from one to another. And somewhere I have seen teachers who say that I like to be a friend to my students are more seamlessly able to jump into the role of a guide and a philosopher and then come back. That because
Yeah.
there is that personal connect, it is
True.
on that foundation of trust and connection
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
the child is receptive to the guidance, to the philosophy, and whatever
Hmm.
else that the
Hmm.
teacher's going
It's
to say.
easier to navigate and maneuver for them because
Exactly.
there's something that they've already established, and now it's very easy for them to, work around it.
Absolutely.
Correct.
And what is the role
Hmm.
of a friend essentially is to be understanding, without judging. That's
Yeah.
that's all there is. Once that is established,
Hmm.
which I know is very, very difficult, especially for teachers who come from a space of, bachon ko ye karna hi hai, they have to get certain percentage. This is how they will, grow into, responsible adults. And so it's not easy to step into that role
Yeah,
either.
and in that role, you can't be a 10 on 10 also. Like,
Of
you
course.
you can't be a friend to the entire class. Like, you
That's
may,
right.
there'll always be, some oddballs, and there will always be a space where things will be a little gray and tricky. Cool. So these are the
Absolutely. What
three
about
roles. But
you,
like I
Garima?
said,
What is your definition of these three? Is
yeah,
it
that's
pretty
that's
much
I'm
the
pretty
same,
much with
or
you. I'm pretty much with you on the three definitions. What's interesting for me to now understand here is fine, cool. This is the vibe. You've established that, and I also feel that increasing the younger the kids are, I think that friendly role is very important in the elementary years and then in the higher years, especially in the teen years or in this middle school sort of an age, where we all feel that, we have a chip on the shoulder and we know everything, and, the world
Hmm.
is going to revolve around our little finger. I think that is the time when you need more of a guide. That is the time when you need somebody to help you identify right from wrong. The relevance of a mentor, or a guide or somebody I idealize, and hence I want to walk in their footsteps, is so much more in my middle years rather than the early years, where, one is naive, one is almost a toddler, and it's very easy for me to follow like a little chimp. The mirror neurons are way too active at that point of time, and, as a small kid, a friendly approach works. Similarly, this friendly approach, I've seen it work very effectively in the senior years, where again I will idolize you, or I will walk this path, I will be friendly with you if I see you've earned it in life, especially professional, semi-professional, vocational courses environment. Because I am not a traditional teacher, right? I spent a decade and a half in the corporate world, and then I moved towards teaching and stuff. I realized that, that philosopher thing and the whole guide and a friendly approach is working way more there, because they see you as somebody who's earned this. over a period of time. Oh, fine, you've been there, done that. You understand how the space functions. And when you bring a lot of practical knowledge and when you talk about a lot of experiential, case studies there in those classes, then naturally on the back of that learning, does the friendly equation form. It's no more specific to your personal conversations. And I think the middle years are the most tricky. But I'll go back to the question that I was asking you, that in the training space, and
Mm,
in the going by the book of raising yourself as a teacher, and this is more from a wanting to learn myself
mm,
as well, is there a perfect formula of who do I be in these classes, like which approach do I take to really strike that right balance? How does one get into that space? What does training material say about this? Or is there at all even a conversation here? Because I know that there are a lot of emotional intelligence themes and topics, a lot of communication style themes and topics that we're going to cover in the next 25 days. But if I purely have to if somebody has to just look at this and say, okay, fine, I can be either of this, but what's the path do I tread? So do we have like a formula around that?
there is no literature as such that kind of specifically talks about this as such. The
Hmm.
literature that does talk about a teacher's and educator's role beyond just subject matter expertise does go into the philosophy and psychology of what are the things that influence a child and what kind of an
Hmm.
environment that really nurtures the child to be able to thrive and express themselves fully, to be curious in life. I think a lot of literature does focus on the curiosity of a child and the role of a teacher to facilitate that curiosity or keep that curiosity alive, right?
Alive. Hmm.
Yeah, so that's I think that's where a lot of literature itself is. But now more and more, like you said, more and more schools and institutions are recognizing that there is a need for life skill education, right, where
Hmm.
children do need to have the kind of exposure that will help
Hmm.
them become better decision makers, to become more analytical, critical thinking, and communication skills and emotional regulation, all of these things, right? So I think there is still that boxing that happens, life skills भी एक subject हो गया.
Hmm.
Right? So that is something that this is how I have seen it. This is my experience on the, from interacting and working with schools as such. I'm not saying it's wrong. That's one way, but how does it spill over in other areas as well, or the rest of the day or the rest of the year for the child? I think that is something that um, still needs to be explored. Now, thinking about, or rather exploring, what is the right formula or degree to which we will be a friend or a philosopher, there is no uh, formula, A plus B whole square जैसा कोई formula तो नहीं है. But, I think it also depends upon the context for a teacher as to why they're doing it
Hmm.
and when they're doing it, right? Have we
Hmm.
created a space in the classroom where every child knows that if there is an issue, I can reach out to this person? If
Right.
I'm struggling, I have a backup here, I have a safety net here, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
In one of the conversations, I remember you talking about how a classroom may, matlab, in an entire classroom, different children are at different spaces, and as a teacher, there is a
True.
tendency to connect with few of those students, right? What happens when we connect with only a few students is
Right.
somewhere we become unreachable or unapproachable
Hmm.
to another set of students.
Hmm.
And so the us being able to step into the role of a guide or a philosopher, or even a mentor for them, it's not going to be effective,
Hmm.
because there is no connect over there. Especially
Hmm.
when we hear children talk about how they favor these children only.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So once they start looking at us from that lens, it's difficult to go beyond that.
Yeah, and it's so easy to fall in that trap because the point is that so the context in which we were having this conversation is that from a communications lens, there will always be these students who are jumpy, out there, want to be seen, and therefore they would answer all the questions and they would be very interactive and they would want to share a lot. And in a class of 40, 50 odd students, if there are 10 such students who are always willing to be seen, willing to be in limelight, and even if you give them a chance each in every class, then the time has passed. How do you focus on the remaining 40? And that's where our role as a teacher comes in, right? You got to tune yourself in a way where you're conscious of these unconscious biases that may come in, right? And I think the step one is to acknowledge that this happens in a class instead of being defensive because it's a very basic human tendency. In fact, it carries on in the boardroom later in your careers. It carries on a family dining table where of
True.
the four siblings, five cousins, 20 people in a party, this situation is going to keep popping up again and again and again. And if you do not get a chance to express yourself in a safe environment where you were supposed to, be
Be
seen,
able to.
and effort was to be made for us to really recognize you for what you bring to the table, then I think then it's my failing as a teacher. And we also, you remember, we also had this discussion about how it's an equal responsibility of the two. It is equally the responsibility of the child to make an effort to be seen. But yes, maybe and that's where the elementary years to the middle years to the senior years to vocational education, that if the child doesn't open up again and again and again, year on year, and that becomes a pattern, then that sets in, that then that becomes a part of the behavior, and then child himself or herself feels that, oh, this is my nature, I'm the shy one, I'm the quiet one, and that's who I am, and I've made peace with it. But the question is that serving you? And same is the question that I need to ask as a teacher, that is it serving me that 70% of my class is quiet and just passive? So I think this is a very layered subject, and there are a lot of aspects that we'll need to touch upon as we go along. And just coming, yeah, you want to come in and say something?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. The line where you said, yes, there is equal responsibility. The child can also, you know, step up. It's your responsibility as well to speak up. Somewhere, I think the onus is slightly more on the teachers, right? Because they
Absolutely.
create that space. It's not
Absolutely.
easy as a child, literally and figuratively, children are smaller than the
Mm,
adults, and they're constantly
mm,
reminded of that as well,
mm,
right? Who
mm.
knows better? You're a child, you listen to me. I'm
Yeah.
better, I'm elder, we respect elders, always listen to your elders. Matlab, we're
Mm,
so deeply trained,
mm.
right? In
True.
fact, there are training programs where, um, just to demonstrate that in a classroom full of teachers, I would randomly pick one teacher and say, can you please go back, go and stand at the back of the room. They will stand up, look a bit confused, and then they will walk back. And I make it a point to pick up the oldest of the lot,
Mm.
right? So what that says is, simply because I'm standing in the front of the classroom, all of you here,
Wow.
irrespective of your age or experience in the field, have already pushed me on a pedestal.
True.
And
True.
simply because I hold that authority here, we have
Hmm.
been trained. Don't question authority. If they say, you listen.
True.
You
True.
have no idea why I picked you. You have no idea why
Yeah.
I asked you to go and stand in the back. You could have asked me, but why? I want to listen to this. No, I want to sit. But nobody does. Not a single person.
No, and if you do that, then that's seen as improper behavior.
Exactly.
Sometimes questioning the teachers, and Preeti, that's so interesting, that's so powerful what you're saying. The physical dynamics of a classroom setting, the way the chairs are arranged, the way the space in those, sometimes the sitting space is so constricted and so limiting in itself.
Mm,
And if a child is trying to be comfortable there and is a little fidgety doing that, even that is pointed out. Whereas a teacher gets
absolutely.
on the headroom. And this takes me back to my classrooms. Like I would always try and I think this also happens at a subconscious level because of the kind
Mm,
of personal trainings that one has done, right? Trying to get them in a circle, trying to make them stand as if all of them are seen equally. Most often than not, I find myself standing right at the back of the room
mm.
and wanting to come to the head of the room and give like a presentation. So now I'm realizing that, I think it can also be so much a body language and intuitive balancing of the room. But in the early years, sitting in your chair and desk is always seen as something that's like the most disciplinary thing that one can do.
Absolutely.
And all of these things become a part of the power dynamics in the class.
Exactly. So then, how can we tell children to take full responsibility for their expression?
True, true, and later on, right? Like for me, I think where we're coming from is like I'm saying, I'm understanding as we're going along is in the senior years when the nature is so, uh, like it's much more concrete. In early years it's much more possible to work around it and play with it and fluid, but as you become a more senior, and same happens, because one has seen the corporate life for so long, same are the
Mm,
dynamics of the corporate life,
mm,
right? In a boardroom, who's sitting on the head table, in a press conference, what's the power dynamic, in a presentation that we're giving in a room, what's the scenario like, to the extent that in a room, who is served tea and coffee first and
mm,
who's asked for it later. Like, while we feel that these things don't impact, but all of this is a part of psychology, all of this is a part of emotional intelligence, all of this is a part of the energy flow in the room. And therefore, one thing that I'm realizing as we're talking about this is that why just 25 skills? Teachers training is a space where every day the teacher needs to be a learner first. Every day a good teacher needs to be a good student first. Every day you must wear your hat of learning more than hat of teaching.
mm.
Yeah, because as you learn over the period of time is only that's the only way you can impart. Like the CAs, like consultants, like doctors, like so many other professionals. I think teaching is one profession where the science of learning, human learning, is evolving at such a pace. And
I
I've
think
also
that is also why today there is such a crazy outburst, so to say, of unschoolers and homeschoolers and road schoolers and alternative schools as such,
true.
because I think these are the schools that are these are people who started these schools, who are starting these other forms of education, who are seeing that
Hmm.
gap in the
Hmm.
current schooling system,
Hmm.
that somewhere the schools have become curriculum led or teacher
Oriented.
led rather than child led and curiosity led.
True. True.
Right?
True.
So, what is the end game? And keeping that end game in mind, what is the route that we're taking? Is that, are we taking a holistic approach? Who are we really serving? And at the same time, I also want to tell the audience, educators' role is definitely not easy. There's a whole lot of stress and burnout that they're
True.
already facing
True.
for the
True.
number of things that they have to, juggle on their plate, from curriculum to, having to submit to the pressure from the higher ups, the authority to complete the curriculum to ensure every child does a certain way. Then, of course, they have their own life's problems, Garka problems, this, that, and the other. They also have to continue to be a teacher after school time, because most teachers are sitting and correcting and preparing for the next day, even after school hours. Right? So there is a lot on their plate. And Not to say that, this is one more thing I need you to take on the plate,
True,
but there
true.
is a different approach that we can take, and that is what we want to talk about here.
Absolutely. And this is not coming from a place of doing more, but this is coming from a place of being more expansive and being more. And honestly,
Beautiful.
at every age, at every stage, we've had teachers who've been that person who's been a little more than just their subject matter. And I think we've just scratched the surface on this today, Preeti. But definitely, what we've established is that this is a very wholesome topic. This is a topic that just does not concern teachers, but concerns an entire generation of learners. While there's a lot that's happening on the academic front, on the academic upskilling of teachers, there's an equal amount of emphasis that must be laid on the psychological and emotional development of the capacity of the teachers. And that's not only going to produce more confident learners at a younger age, but a far more wholesome professional and a personal, individual whose capacity to be more is going to get impacted. And I think it was a lovely chat. Like I said, just the surface being scratched here. There's so much more that's going to come our way in the coming 2 to 3 weeks that we're going to keep talking about this further. And I also want to open this up for our audience to share comments, their thoughts, and more topics that they'd want us to cover. And we'll see them again tomorrow, same time in the morning on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and Instagram. And happy to just keep discovering more as we go in this journey.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful start, and I'm super excited. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I look forward to more such conversations. Thank you, Garima.
Lovely. See you, Preeti. Bye bye.
Bye bye.